territory, where Armenians were relocated in 1915, was intended to be removed from the borders of the Ottoman state at the end of the First World War. However, some of the Armenians who were displaced within the country through relocation and resettlement, and the Armenian gang members called komitadjis who were proven guilty, realised that they could not stay in the country and migrated to rich Western countries. Thus, an Armenian diaspora was born, led by those who were involved in terrorist activities or committed crimes within Turkey's borders. The komitadji groups gathered within the diaspora started in the new era in the Armenian propaganda, and the first examples of that can be seen in the 1900s. This attitude of the Armenian diaspora against Turkey was seen as a diplomatic leverage, particularly by some Western countries. After the First World War, Turkey rejected the imposition of Sevres, started the national campaign, and came out victorious. This ruined the plans of Western powers to partition Turkey, and Turkey managed to become the only country to draw its own borders in the Middle East, which was being designed. As brute force failed, this time soft power and diplomatic pressure would be used to achieve the plans. As the population of Armenians in Anatolia decreased, the same groups would strive to create new fault lines to divide Turkey. For this purpose, the focus would be on the subject that would cause pressure on the newly found Republic of Turkey, sectarian ethnic separatism and the issue of Armenians. Therefore, a new alliance was born between the komitadjis within the Armenian diaspora living in Western countries and the colonial powers. Armenian diaspora propagandists of this period aimed to keep the terms of Sevres alive by blockading the Republic of Turkey, which rejected the Treaty of Sevres and gained international recognition by the Treaty of Lausanne. For example, the Turkish-American Treaty of Lausanne, which was signed between Turkey and the US 13 days after the Treaty of Lausanne, was not ratified by the US Senate. A lobby group led by the former Ottoman citizen Vahan Kardashian blocked the ratification of the treaty through protests, press campaigns, and lobbying during the ratification controversy, which lasted about 4 years. Such pressure on a newly independent republic which just started establishing diplomatic relations was seen as a means to put Sevres into effect again, especially in those years. Although Armenia became a Soviet republic back then, the Armenian diaspora kept their fascistic attitude with the dream of the Great Armenia, and they worked against Turkey and Azerbaijan. Armenian propaganda in this period could not reach its goal because of the decisive attitude of the Republic of Turkey. In the following years, the propaganda of the Armenian diaspora changed its shape. Komitadji leaders of the Armenian diaspora living in the Western countries voted as a united front in those democracies, obtaining material and non-material gains as a result. One of the prerequisites of Armenians for becoming active in the politics of these countries was to make political alliance with communities working against Turkey by keeping the so-called genocide claims alive. Therefore, many komitadjis in the diaspora and Armenia established a so-called genocide industry from which they gained financial benefits. The Republic of Turkey proved that it is a rooted country which will stay in the region forever and pursued an effective diplomacy. This weakened the allegations and propaganda of the Armenian diaspora. The propaganda of the Armenian komitadjis was relatively weaker during the period from the 1930s to 1965. By the 1970s, Turkey was dealing with the Cyprus problem alongside the bipolar Cold War. The 1974 Cyprus peace operation was carried out in a determined manner and got a reaction from some of the Western countries. The Armenian terrorist organisation Asala, which emerged during this period, became an actor in the new era of Armenian terrorism, with terrorist acts aimed at Turkish diplomats and civilians. Claims of the Armenian diaspora and the so-called genocide industry cooperated closely with other groups and lobbies whose interests were in conflict with those of Turkey. They started to present their baseless claims through effective campaigns to the public opinion of the Western countries in a more visible manner, while they kept on committing their terrorist acts as well. In response to Turkey's pro-solution attitude, the diaspora komitacıs wanted the issue to persist. By keeping the Armenian issue constantly on the agenda, they fulfilled their task in the plan of using this as a leverage against Turkey. Perhaps the most beautiful expression of the preposterous and unscientific claims produced by the propaganda of the Armenian diaspora and the komitacıs can be found in the story called Heritage, from Armenian Vahan Totovents, who witnessed the events himself. Let's listen to the story in his own words. Once upon a time, there was a great war. The whole world was enveloped by the smoke of gunpowder, and there flowed rivers of blood. The Western heads of state and the wealthy compatriots shouted into people's ears, "The hour of freedom has come. Strike your neighbour, strike his stick with your cross." The black and beautiful eyes of this ancient nation sparkled with the desire for freedom. An unequal fight began. They struck and were struck, and of this ancient people there remained a mere fragment, a memory of a nightmare. And then those wealthy compatriots and Western heads of state laughed with great derision over the ashes and bones.